All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Joel Haas, joined by Lyle Alenstein of the Daily Collegian. We're here to talk some Penn State football. The Nittany Lions coming off a 33-30 overtime victory over USC in California. This week they're on a bye week, their second of the season. The first time Penn State's had 2 bye weeks in a season, but it's all part of the expanded college football playoff, something we'll talk about a little bit later. But today we'll share our thoughts, some more reactions from the game against USC, and then we'll kind of give some updates on the program and kind of where it stands halfway through the regular season before looking at kind of a bigger picture, taking a look at the Big Ten Conference, any surprising results around the league and some things that are happening there. And then we'll turn our attention to the postseason race and where Penn State sits in terms of the college football playoff, which, as we all know, has expanded to 12 teams this season. Before we get into it, I just want to thank our sponsor, Voodoo Brewing. Enjoy world-renowned craft beer, delicious cocktails, and our almost famous lobster rolls at Voodoo Brewing Co. State College Pub, located right off College Avenue and Route 322 at 201 Elmwood Street, State College. VBC State College has something exciting going on every day of the week. Join us this fall on Mondays for weekly free play cornhole tournaments. Test your knowledge with pub trivia every Tuesday at 6. Wednesday is game night featuring board games, card games, and adult games. Every Thursday, your boy Dots hosts bingo, but this isn't your Nana's bingo. Saturday, we have our Nittany Lions and college football on all day, and finish on Sunday with our weekly brunch paired with Steelers, Eagles, and Red Zone coverage. We can't wait to see you all at the State College Pub. So, Lyle, we'll just jump right into it. Now that you've had some more time to digest the USC game, obviously, we gave our post-game thoughts initially, and we kind of touched on it. But is there anything that stood out to you now that you've had some more time to kind of think over the game?
I mean, we talked about it a bunch in the post game. Tyler Warren and Julian Fleming, I think, were the two winners of the day for Penn State. Obviously, Tyler Warren broke every single record that there is to know in college football. Obviously, monster day, 17 catches, 224 yards. Caught that touchdown that he played center on. He ran for a QB sneak, completed a pass. Not a whole lot more you need to say there. I feel like everyone's talking about Tyler Warren now on a more national scale. Obviously, those of us that have covered the team more locally knew what he's been about, but everyone's talking about him except for Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren will never talk about himself. He'd always be the first guy to point out his teammates' success, which when someone asked him about his individual success against USC, and he pointed immediately to Julian Fleming, who had those 2 big 4th down catches, despite struggles earlier in the game, and how that was a turning point. So, obviously he's been incredible. He's going to continue to be that big target for Drew, which he needs. But then after looking at the game again, just more like being able to just take more of a wider scope look at it. Drew Allar, I think, was a big winner. I think he played, I don't want to say very well. I think statistically speaking, he's had cleaner games just due to the 3 interceptions. Obviously, 2 of them were real interceptions that I don't really count that Hail Mary. And he did have a career high in passing yards. He had 391, the third time going over 300 yards in his career. But I just think the poise late in the 4th quarter in overtime just is a big thing for him in year 2, because he didn't in these big moments last year against Michigan, Ohio State, Ole Miss, big time games he struggled. And while this USC is a great team, and I don't think this is a same caliber opponent, though don't get me wrong, I still think USC should be ranked. But the comfort level on that big of a stage in a tough road environment, trailing, being able to battle back, bring the team back to victory. I think that just shows his growth, not only as a player, but just being able to handle the big time moments. A lot during the offseason, he talked about just the experience has helped him. He's now more comfortable in year 2. And I think you really saw that to him. I think he wasn't afraid to make mistakes, but he's not afraid to make the big plays. And I think that's partially due to scheming with Andy Kolnicki. He's not just check down merchant. If he's throwing the ball around, he's spraying it downfield. And I think you're just really seeing a more emotional side of him this year. Obviously, he's been talking a lot of smack. Obviously you saw that evident against West Virginia after that big stiff arm run. But then you just see how passionate he is. Obviously against USC, he was on the field. He gave Andy Kolnicki that big hug post game, and you saw the tears again. But those, more in a positive light.
Happy tears this time.
Happy tears. No teary eyed saying that he sucked. But I think that just speaks volumes to how far he's grown as a player. And I think going forward, when you get into these big games, I think you got to feel way more confident where Allar is a player compared to last year.
Yeah, I want to go back to the beginning of what you said, just the Tyler Warren buzz and the way that kind of the national media has really discovered who Tyler Warren was. Obviously, like you said, we all kind of knew locally about Tyler Warren, but kind of a soft-spoken guy. Kind of the opposite of Deny Dennis Sutton, who refers to himself in the third person.
Dennis
But yeah,
Sutton will have a big game.
Yeah, Deny Dennis Sutton played well today. Tyler Warren, kind of the opposite. And so I do think that kind of almost hurts him a little bit. It's interesting because I think he's the only player on Penn State's roster who doesn't have a Twitter account. If you go to their roster online, he doesn't have one linked, and if you search his name on Twitter, nothing comes up. But yeah, I think that just kind of shows his personality and who he is. But obviously, a big game from him, and we saw a lot of kind of bigger national names talking about him, whether it was for the Mackey Award for best tight end in the country, or whether it was even the Heisman Award, which I thought was kind of funny. I saw you can actually bet on him to win the Heisman now, which he wasn't even listed before the game, but afterward now you can get him at 100-1 if you really believe in the Tyler Warren Heisman hype.
The sneaky bet there.
That could be a play. Could be a little lock there from Lyle. I don't know how confident you are in that one. It was funny because after the play where he snaps the ball, runs down the seam, and then catches the touchdown, obviously mossing the USC defender. I saw a lot of these big accounts tweeting about Tyler Warren being a center, and all these accounts were tweeting Penn State center just caught a touchdown and stuff like that. And it just went to show you that like people don't know who he is. Like they did not know who Tyler Warren was, so they thought he was the center after seeing him snap the ball. I think it's funny because Nick Dawkins' draft stock probably just shot up just because he's the Penn State center and people are going to think he was one with a touchdown. So, yeah, his stock is probably through the roof now as well, thanks to Tyler Warren. But big game from Warren, and like you touched on, Drew Allar, not the greatest game. Obviously, you can point to the interceptions. Unfortunately, I think I might have jinxed him there. I tweeted about his interception to pass attempt ratio, which was like on pace to be best in the country or in history. Marcus Mariota currently holds the lowest career interception to pass attempt ratio, and Allar's on pace to break that. He's still on pace to break that, but 3 interceptions against USC obviously doesn't help. So it was kind of the opposite of what we've seen from him previously, where he was maybe a little bit too careful, a little bit too conservative with the ball. We saw him kind of taking more risks, airing it out. Obviously, that's going to come with more interceptions, but it also comes with some more big plays, like that touchdown to Tyler Warren that we mentioned, where he mossed the guy. That maybe isn't a throw that he takes last year because he might not be willing to push the ball down the field in tight coverage. Because credit to USC there, people were talking about the creativity of the play. USC kind of sniffed that out. They had a defender playing very tight on Tyler Warren that whole time. So it was a trick play, but USC didn't necessarily fall for the trick. It still had to be a great catch at the end to actually haul that in, and there's a chance that gets broken up. But Allar obviously does a lot for himself there, kind of proving his ability to come back in a big game. Now, I think USC losing to Minnesota and going into that game is the number 26 team in the country, basically, takes a little bit away from it. I don't know if people necessarily look at it as a huge game for Penn State there. But again, it came on the road and they were narrow favorites. They actually didn't cover the spread because it got up to 5.5 or whatever it reached. So obviously it was a tight game. People were expecting a tight game. Penn State came out on top. I don't think anyone expected Penn State to go down the way it did early in that game. But again, the ability to battle back coming out of halftime, which, that's something Franklin talked about. That's something that we got to talk to Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen today as well. And they both kind of referenced that in passing about how the team has really struggled out of the gate. Franklin said, it's great to be a second half team, but they want to be an all 4 quarters team. They want to, start faster. And that's kind of something that's been an issue all season. At this point, we're halfway through the season. They're sitting at 6-0. So it hasn't yet, come back to bite them, but they've had some scares, whether it was Bowling Green, whether it was USC, maybe even the slow start against Illinois where they're tied at halftime. There's been some times where you're questioning, Penn State, can they pull this one out? And again, that all just goes back to kind of the slower starts. They've looked great in the second half, but obviously you have to play a full 60 minutes, especially if you want to beat a team like Ohio State or win any potential postseason games down the line. After, we've gotten to talk to Franklin and the coordinators and the players, what are your thoughts on the slower starts?
It's interesting because you look at it and it's like they're still 6-0 and you've seen them being able to adjust, but it's also, you've seen it not necessarily together. I mean, you could argue USC, yes, but it's been a lot of one game the offense has had a slower start versus the defense has had a slower start. So I think it's kind of hard to judge. I mean, my biggest thing is on the defensive side of the ball, you look at Kent State and how nobody could tackle. Defensive against Bowling Green. Nobody tackling was abysmal in that game. And Bowling Green, we've come to learn, is a respectable MAC opponent. Hung in with Texas A&M. And Harold Fannin Jr., you can argue, is one of the best tight ends in college football. I'm still
probably Tyler Warren's biggest competition for the MAC award at this point.
Which I think Tyler Warren probably took personally when they played Bowling Green. No, Tyler Warren probably didn't care. He would never say anything like that. But so you saw that slow start, and that's a veteran Bowling Green team. A lot of returners, seniors, 5th years, 6 years, guys that stuck around. But it's still a MAC offense, and they got torched. And other than USC, I think that was the best offensive output that Penn State has seen from their opposing team this year. And that's against, obviously, West Virginia has had some struggles, but Garrett Green is a great playmaker. CJ Donaldson, Team White, those are really talented running backs. Illinois, Luke Altmaier that's still a ranked. Yeah, they're still ranked. Yeah. That's a rank. Yeah, they're a rank. That's a ranked squad. They've got some terrific wide receivers that you can argue other than USC. That's been the best duo that they've seen so far this year. So that's my thing. That's you can't struggle against those teams. They've taken care of business. That second half, they adjusted, just like Tom Allen's been doing all season. They shut them down. But you can't be having those slow starts when you play Ohio State. And then you look at it on the other side of the ball on offense, Kent State. Now this is the worst MAC. This is the worst college football team probably in the country. And you put up 7 points in the first quarter. They ended up, I think, 56 points, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And 8 different guys score touchdown. But and then take it with a grain of salt because it's Kent State. They still poured it on. But I wouldn't be too concerned because you figure out how things go. Because I think when we had Andy Kolnicki today on Zoom, he talked about it's not just adjusting on a per quarter basis, per half, depending on how the game plan goes. They're adjusting every play, every series. So and he also talked about how you're getting more film at this point in the season, which I get. You're able to correct things, but how far can you go by living and dying on a possession basis? Because you want to be firmly controlled from all aspects of the game, and that starts with coming out of the gates.
Yeah, it's just that we're 6 games in, and it's kind of the same issue regardless of what position group it is. And I think it is something that the team's trying to figure out. We heard them talking about it. They're kind of evaluating everything. They're really trying to dig in and kind of hone in on what the issue is here so that they can get it corrected. They were even looking at things like their recovery schedule and their practice schedule and things like that, and the way that, that could potentially be impacting them coming out and having slow starts. Maybe they're not getting enough rest throughout the week or having too intense practices, too close to games, something like that. So they're really looking at this, from every aspect and trying to kind of identify what that issue is. But, they're coming up, right? You got a couple more weeks now. You don't have a lot of time left to figure that thing out. So if you're going to do it, take this bye week and do it. But we do sit at kind of the halfway point of Penn State's season. Obviously, if they play postseason games, there'll be, a little bit more than half their games remaining. But as far as the regular season goes, Penn State now 6-0. We've gotten to get kind of a better feel for the team. We've seen them against some Big Ten opponents now. Maybe not the greatest competition, but I think still a pretty solid test, especially that USC game. Like Franklin mentioned, obviously it's much better to enter the bye week having won the previous game compared to a loss, because then you kind of have 2 weeks to let that soak in. But I don't know, looking back on kind of the way the season has unfolded, I tend to think Penn State's best game so far has been week 1 against West Virginia and Morgantown, a 41-10 win over a pretty tough Mountaineers squad that's not anything special, but also, not any pushover or anything like that. And to do it in week 1, when that's supposed to be the game where you kind of show some mistakes and show some rust, where you're not necessarily playing at your best. And I thought Penn State looked its best against West Virginia. I don't know if you agree or not, but that's something that I found interesting.
I agree in terms of a complete effort minus kicking field goals. I think offensively that game was complete. Drew managed the game perfectly, and you saw him open up the playbook, explosive plays. You saw Harrison Wallace was the only wide receiver that really produced in that game, but that's not really, I think that's just when you look at the West Virginia game, because you've seen all their main wide receivers produce at this point of the season. And defensively, they shut down that West Virginia rushing attack, and they didn't really struggle at all. They dominated that game coming off of a 2-hour rain delay, a supposed pretty intense, energetic atmosphere. And they came out of there with a comfortable win against a team that a lot of people picked as an upset week one, as a trap game for Penn State. So I do agree with a complete effort. That game was the best, I think. But when you look in terms of what the team is capable of, I don't want to say USC is the best game to look at. I think
maybe just the second half.
Yeah, second half on. Because that's, I touched on when we were talking about Drew. But this team, I don't want to say it's as far as Drew is going to take it, but it's going to be a big factor in if they beat Ohio State, if they succeed in the playoffs. And I think he's very well capable of it. He's proven it because he didn't do it against Michigan and Ohio State. And I think his first real test of adversity, when you look at it now, before the season, you can argue it was West Virginia, but it was that second half against USC. And he battled back. He hit his guys. He wasn't afraid of the moment. And it's a comeback win. Obviously, there's other factors going into it. But when you're able to go into the half down 14 against a team that I'm going to live on this, that USC should be ranked. Not anymore because they had 3 losses, but at the time of the game. But when you're able to go in on the road, first time making that kind of travel, and against a team that is very good, has a chip on their shoulder because they know that they're a team that's capable of Penn State, and you lead them when you're down 2 scores into an overtime win. I think that kind of just speaks volumes to what the team is capable of. And the defense, we just touched on adjustments, but they came in, they battled back, they made big plays. Denied Dennis Sutton. Denied Dennis Sutton will make a big play. He makes big play. Hit a couple of big TFLs. Jalen Reed had that interception. And then you saw new kicker, Ryan Barker, 4 for 4 on field goals, hit that game winner. And that's a big win. You saw how excited they were post-game. Obviously, there's something to be said about should they have been dominant from right at the jump? Yes. But I still think we saw really what the team was made of in that second half.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're Penn State, you 100% will take that win, right? Celebrate that win, enjoy being 1-0 or 6-0, however you want to look at it. Enjoy beating a tough USC team on the road and everything like that. But, once you're kind of done with the celebration, it is time to take a look in the mirror and say, we still had a bad start. The run game struggled, which has kind of been on and off so far this season. And then it felt like defensively, they missed a ton of tackles, especially on the running backs. I attributed a lot of that to the linebackers. I thought they had a pretty poor game overall against USC. And so if you're Penn State, there's definitely some identifiable issues. We've gotten to the point in the season where it's not just, a one-off thing, or it's not just something that's easily correctable. It's something that's kind of been plaguing the team now for the entire first half of the season, and things that, if you don't get fixed in the second half, where obviously the schedule in the back half is always going to be tougher once you get into the heart of Big Ten play and things like that. And, the weather's getting cold and you're going on these road games to these hostile environments, things like that. Obviously, Penn State will have some challenges coming up. I think there's a lot of improvement to be made. I think most of it lies on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, I feel like they've done a pretty good job of kind of living up to expectations. But I guess more specifically, they brought in 2 new coordinators, Koto Nicky on offense and Tom Allen on defense. They also brought in Justin Lustig for special teams. And, at the halfway point of the season, in my eyes, Koto Nicky is the only one who's kind of lived up to expectations and performed on par with really what we were told he was going to be like. I don't know if you have, agree or not, but.
I mean, if I had to pick an MVP between the trio of the coordinators, I would 100% say Koto Nicky. With good old Mike Yursich at the helm last year, you didn't see what some of these playmakers were capable of, and obviously you had the wide receiver struggles. This year, Drew's average depth of target has dramatically shot up. He's throwing the ball down the field. Obviously, you'd see resurgence from Nick Singleton, who was okay last year. Katron, I think, was a completely better back, but you're seeing what they're capable of now, just like that freshman season when they were able to bounce back off of each other and split carries. But the big knack on this Penn State offense going into the season was, will the wide receivers perform? And granted, Tyler Warren is the top target. There's nothing wrong with it, but you've seen Harrison Wallace against West Virginia perform. You've seen Liam Clifford go over 100 yards. Julian Fleming made those 2 big catches. Omari Evans has gone over 100 yards and is the deep threat for Penn State. And it's speaking volumes to what Koto Nicky's done. And then on top of Tyler Warren, Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds playing behind him at the tight end spot have made an impact, not necessarily on the stat sheet, but on blocking. They're they're threats on the field because you have to account for them every time you go out. Luke Reynolds, 5-star true freshman. There's a reason he burned that red shirt. He earned that playing time. But then it's just not on top of just getting these explosive plays. I mean, they talked about getting their best playmakers the ball, which they've been able to do. But it's just the creativity. When I sum up this offense last year, it's Drew checking it down, run, pass. And then you got when they're going 5 wide, empty backfield, it's just Drew shotgun. It's a screen almost every time. But this year, you're seeing 4 guys in the backfield. You're seeing Tyler Warren line up under center, taking snaps, direct snaps, running read options. He's throwing the ball. And you're seeing, you've seen Drew Shelton line up wide. You've seen Anthony Donko line up wide. You've seen Vega Ioane go in motion. And we definitely haven't seen it all. Like, it's the halfway point of the season.
Right.
Today, Nittany talked about being complete with his play calling. He didn't want to, I think he said something like, he doesn't want to be grab baggy per se. That's what he said. And I think that just means like there's a fine line between being creative and having fun with it and being efficient as an offense. And I don't really know what an offense looks like when you're running those plays and it's not trying to be efficient, because you haven't seen that from him. He's been effective in all these different looks that he's played so far.
Yeah, I think the offense, what's impressed me the most is that they've been able to win in different ways. Whether it was a come from behind, win against USC where Drew Allar throws for almost 400 yards, or whether it's the Illinois game where they're just grinding out these runs and playing a very physical style of ball, maybe a little bit more conservative. I think the offense has proven that it can kind of win in different ways. So credit to Kotelnicki, because a lot of the guys in that room are the same guys that were here last year under Jurcic. Allar, Singleton, Katron. A little bit of turnover on the offensive line, but Tyler Warren was there last year. He wasn't doing things like this. All the wide receivers except for Julian Fleming were here last year, and they weren't doing stuff like this. And you mentioned all the guys who have now had 100-yard games. I think if you go down the stats and really look into it, most of Penn State's wide receivers this year have already surpassed their season totals from last year. I think they've all gotten a lot more involved. And again, credit to Kotelnicki, because I think the only really factor that changed within the offense was Jurcic to Kotelnicki, because everything else is pretty much the same as it was last year in terms of personnel. And so you have to, kind of give Kotelnicki the credit there for being able to get the most out of his guys, which is something that we heard he wanted to do. But defensively, I almost feel like it's the opposite situation where there's a lot of turnover on the defense, and then there's, also change at defensive coordinators. So it's hard to kind of measure how much of this is maybe the defense just losing 6 or 7 starters, however many it is from last year to the draft, and how much of it is, Tom Allen not being as efficient at defensive coordinator as Manny Diaz. Obviously, Diaz was regarded as one of the best defensive coordinators in the country during his 2 years at Penn State. And last year, they led the country in a couple of key statistics. I think yards allowed and sacks, they were number 1 in both of those in the country. Obviously, they haven't been quite as good this year. There's still some talented players on that defense, and you have to give credit to whether it's Tom Allen, James Franklin for bringing in AJ Harris. Getting a big time transfer has been a big contributor. Same with Jalen Kimber, has earned starts. I think you credit them for identifying an area of weakness where you sent 3 cornerbacks to the NFL, brought some guys in. Obviously, Jalen Reed has looked good, but at the same time, I feel like the defensive line has maybe taken a step back. The sacks just are not there this year. Penn State's well under pace of what it has been the last couple of years in that regard, and the linebackers, I think obviously there's for the most part they're only running with 2 on the field instead of 3, but I think there's been kind of a lack of production from that room. And a guy like even Tony Rojas, who has shown a lot of promise, I think has looked out of position at times and kind of been hitting the wrong gaps and things like that. So defensively, I feel like it's been an underperformance so far from Allen, from at least what we were expecting when he came in. I thought it would be a little bit more of a seamless transition. Obviously, he's trying to run kind of a different schematic defense, and he's not as aggressive, so he's not blitzing as much, and those numbers might not be as high. We got to talk to him today, and he said he doesn't really look at stats. He said that's kind of something that fans and maybe media members look at and care about a lot, but within actual football programs, within coaching staffs, they care more about how much pressure you're getting, and you want to make the quarterback feel your presence and kind of disrupt him, get in his head more than anything. And it doesn't always translate to sacks, but even then I feel like the quarterbacks Penn State has played, some of them have put up some big numbers, whether it was Connor Bazelak, Miller Moss, whoever. So I feel like Penn State still has fallen short on that kind of goal. So I don't know, it feels to me, and this maybe is kind of an obvious statement, but the offense has obviously taken a couple steps forward. The defense has probably taken a step or 2 back. special teams, kind of a fall off there. Don't want to forget about that with the kicker situation, but with Ryan Barker stepping in and he was able to do it against USC, which is obviously a big time game and a big environment. And so I think Barker's kind of solidified himself there. So Penn State moving into the second half of the season should be better at that kicking situation and more confident in what they have there, which I think helps, alleviate some stress on the other units of the team, because the offense doesn't feel like it has to go for it on fourth down and things like that. And the defense isn't worried about those short fields after missed kicks and things like that. But if we can turn our attention to kind of the second half of the schedule, obviously Ohio State's the big game that stands out to everyone. That game's at Beaver Stadium. I think Ohio State's about a 4 or 5 point favorite, but it should be a close one. We know what happened with Ohio State against Oregon. Obviously, they fell, narrow loss. I think 1 point loss at Autzen Stadium. I think if those two teams play again, I feel like Ohio State's probably still favored, especially on a neutral side, or if they even got it in the shoe. So I think if that was a kind of a preview of the potential Big Ten championship game between those two, I think Ohio State still has a shot to kind of run the table and then get Oregon back in the Big Ten championship game should they meet up again. Because it was obviously highly competitive, and Oregon had a big advantage of being at home and in a great home environment at Autzen Stadium. But Ohio State comes to Penn State in the second half of the season. Do you feel like it's that game's kind of lost a little bit of its shine because of Ohio State's loss to Oregon?
No. Yeah. You could have a 2 versus 3 when this game, 3 versus 4, whatever it's going to be. This is 2, at least from an AP poll top 25 perspective, assuming everything goes well, which for both of the team schedules, I think you're going to get a top 5 matchup at Beaver Stadium. I don't know what kind of energy James Franklin can craft if he's already used the whiteout energy, but I think it doesn't matter. I think these are 2 teams that legitimately can be in the college football playoff, regardless of if Oregon's in there or not. If Ohio State loses, that puts pressure, I guess, if they make the playoff, but I don't really know. I still think 1 loss Oregon, 1 loss Penn State, 1 loss Ohio State, or no loss Oregon, no loss Penn State, and 2 loss Ohio State. I think those are all playoff teams, regardless of what the outcome comes up. But I feel like we said this last year too. Penn State, if they play the complete game, they can beat Ohio State. Will I think they pull it off? I'm gonna have to see how the game against Wisconsin goes. But
that sounds like a no.
Yeah, realistically, it's a no, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Is Penn State playing for a Big Ten championship and a national championship? Yes. With the current landscape of other college football teams sandwiched either ahead of them or behind them in that top 10 that are going to be in the playoff, I don't think they really pull it off. And then, granted, we're looking at this 6 games in the season. You never know how the rest of the season shapes up. For all we know, Penn State's got a night game at Camp Randall Stadium, and that could be a loss just because of the environment. Do I think it's going to be a loss? No. But I don't think that's, regardless of how this 2-week stretch plays out, leading up to the Penn State-Ohio State game, I don't think it's going to take anything away from it. Obviously, Penn State is, when you want to call it a rivalry against Ohio State, that's more of a looking at it from a Penn State fan perspective, because Ohio State can only care more about playing Michigan. So, but you've seen all these other teams storm the fields, beating opponents that are worse than them. And when I say worse, I'm looking at it from Vanderbilt beating Alabama and Arkansas beating Tennessee. But Penn State's going to want to storm if they beat Ohio State, because it hasn't happened in 10 years. So I think that adds juice. The environment's going to be there. The players are going to be fired up. Ohio State's going to go in there and handle it business as usual, like it has the past however many times they've played Penn State at Beaver Stadium. So I think regardless of it, you're going to get a good atmosphere, and I think it's not going to take anything away.
That kind of segues well into my next question. But who do you think, looking at the back half of the schedule, are some of Penn State's tougher games? Obviously, Ohio State, but outside of that, what are some of the teams that could potentially hand Penn State a loss? And, what is your season prediction for how the team finishes? What kind of record will they have?
I don't think there is a challenge. Realistically, outside of Ohio State,
you think Wisconsin is anything?
Look, if you want me to look at the rest of the schedule, I'll break it down for you. Wisconsin, it's a night game. Cool. They'll jump around. I don't think it really makes a difference. Personally, just this Luke Fickell, still got some work to do with that program. I think it's trending up, but I don't think this is the year Wisconsin football is fully back.
Well, they lost their quarterback too. They lost
Tyler Van Dyke. I mean, even when he was at Miami, I don't even really think that he was that good. I'm pretty sure he was like a top 10 quarterback in his class. He's never panned out. Obviously, you hate to see a guy go down when you're trying to look for a new start. So that just adds pressure. Ohio State, I think really that's it. I mean, Minnesota, I know Coy Perch, their safety. I think he's an NFL player. I know he's a true freshman. This guy is legit. He made that big time interception against USC. That being said, I don't think their safety is good enough. I mean, I know they beat USC, but I don't think this Minnesota is really that good of a team. I think that's a great win. PJ Fleck, go row the boats, but I don't think that's a challenge for Penn State. Purdue, again, don't think that's good. I would have said Washington after they beat Michigan. I think Michigan's that great still? No. Unfortunately for Penn State, they don't get to play them because I think they probably would have beat them. Mm-hmm. But you still, I guess I'd probably lean Wisconsin being more of a challenge than Washington, considering Washington got 40-pieced by Iowa. That's really where
that's embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone needs to be fired.
Yeah. So that's how I look at Washington right now. So I don't really think I see any challenges other than Ohio State. I think Penn State, they beat them during the Big Ten championship. I don't really know how the scenario plays out if Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State all have one loss. So I don't really know who goes into the Big Ten championship at that point. But I think Penn State, one-loss team entering Big Ten championship, and I think they make the playoff. And I'm going to stand on business with that one.
All right. So I think you have it finishing 11-1 this season. So I would probably agree with you there. Again, I think Penn State's biggest challenge heading into the season was USC, and they handled that task. I still think they lose to Ohio State just because of the caliber of athlete Ohio State says. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, even though they lost to Oregon, I felt like they were probably still the better team in that game. And if they were to play again in the Big Ten championship, I would probably pick Ohio State to win in the rematch. So, but again, Penn State taking care of business. The schedule this year, obviously a little bit different than in years past without Michigan. And so you don't have to kind of worry about that losing streak they have now to Michigan. And Penn State could finish 11-1 this season. Will probably be expected to finish 11-1 this season, which, it's the Ohio State problem. Obviously, if you're Penn State, you would like to figure that out and snap that losing streak to the Buckeyes. But even if you can't, 11-1 is 100%, going to get you into the college football playoff. Whether you get a home game, road game, that's kind of up in the air. It'll depend on some other things that happen around the country. But yeah, if you're Penn State right now, I think, anything short of 11-1 at this point in the season should be considered a pretty big disappointment. But that's it. That's it for today's episode. That's everything we've got on Penn State during the bye week. We'll be back with you. I'll be back with Adam next week. So tune in for that. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.